Your father was the man who raised you, who taught you how to ride a bike, who stood by you during the hardest moments of your life. He was your rock, your protector, your guide. But then, something completely unexpected happens. An innocuous piece of information turns everything you thought you knew upside down. A blood donor list. Sounds simple, right? Maybe something you'd see in a clinic or a hospital, but what if it had the power to unravel the deepest parts of your identity? What if it revealed that the father you knew, the man who raised you, wasn't your father at all? That's the shocking truth that Sarah, a normal young woman just like you, stumbled upon when she decided to donate blood and happened to ask a question that changed her life forever. Hi, I'm so glad you're here because this story will challenge everything you thought you knew about family, identity, and trust. You're probably thinking, how could something as simple as a blood donor list change someone's entire life? I get it. It sounds unbelievable, but stick with me, because what I'm about to share with you is one of the most mind-blowing stories I've ever heard. This isn't just about a simple mix-up or an innocent mistake. This is about a secret so big, so twisted, that it would make you question everything about your own life. And trust me, by the time you finish this video, you'll be questioning the truth behind your own relationships. Let me walk you through Sarah's story, and I promise you, by the end of this, you'll feel the same chills she felt. Sarah, a 28-year-old woman, had always believed her father was the man who raised her, the man who stood beside her in every pivotal moment. To the outside world, everything seemed perfect. She had a happy family, a successful career, and a loving partner. But everything changed when she went to a local clinic to donate blood. It was just a routine checkup. She wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary until one question on the form sent her spiraling down a rabbit hole of shocking revelations. She casually asked about a certain detail on the form, a detail about blood type, and that's when the conversation took a turn she never saw coming. The nurse, just doing her job, mentioned something about Sarah's blood type not matching her father's blood type. Now, let me tell you, this isn't the kind of thing that just slips under the radar. When the nurse said that, Sarah didn't think much of it at first, but deep down, something felt off. And that gut feeling would haunt her for days. Can you imagine the feeling of hearing something like that? I mean, you'd have to be pretty shocked, right? Here's the thing, Sarah didn't jump to conclusions right away. She did what most of us would do, she brushed it off. It didn't make sense. The man she called her father had always been there. She was raised by him, loved by him. Blood types could be wrong, right? Maybe the nurse was just mistaken. But then, the curiosity crept in. The more Sarah thought about it, the more she realized the discrepancies just couldn't be ignored. She started digging into her family's history, asking questions that, up until that point, never even crossed her mind. She learned that her parents had never done a DNA test. How could they have? They had no reason to. This wasn't the 21st century, where things like ancestry tests or genetic research were commonplace. They trusted each other. But now, Sarah began to wonder, what if everything she'd been told about her father wasn't true? What if her whole life had been a lie? The questions kept building up in Sarah's mind, each one darker and more unsettling than the last. Was her father really her father? How could she have never questioned something so basic, so fundamental? And, more importantly, why didn't her mother tell her the truth? What was the reason behind keeping this secret from her? I want you to stop for a second and think about this. Imagine that the person you've always thought of as your parent, the one you've loved, trusted, and looked up to your entire life, wasn't really your parent at all. What would that do to your sense of self? How would it change the way you see the world, the people around you, your whole family? It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? That's what Sarah had to grapple with, and that's the moment when everything shifted. She couldn't let it go. She had to know the truth. She had to find out what was really going on. Sarah, being the person she is, went on a mission to uncover the truth. She didn't just want answers for herself. She wanted to know what was really happening with her family. She wanted to understand why her mother had kept this secret for so long. But, as you might expect, the deeper she dug, the more secrets she uncovered, secrets that changed her perception of everything she thought she knew about her parents, about her life, and about herself. The more Sarah uncovered, the more it seemed like the truth was right there, but it was so much bigger than she could have imagined. And that's when she discovered something that would change everything forever. But here's the kicker: Sarah wasn't the only one with questions. It turns out that there were other people connected to her family who knew the truth all along. People she didn't even know existed, people who had been part of a web of lies and deceit for years. Sarah's story was about to take a dramatic turn, one that would lead her to answers she never expected. But what were those answers? How did Sarah handle this shocking discovery? Did she confront her mother? Did she reach out to the stranger who may or may not be her biological father? The truth, as it turns out, is far more complicated than she ever could have imagined. Now, I'm sure by now you're dying to know, what did Sarah discover? Was her father really who she thought he was? What happened next in this shocking story? I can promise you, the answers are going to blow your mind. But to truly understand the impact of this discovery, we have to look deeper. We have to dive into the emotional journey Sarah took, the challenges she faced, and the truth she had to confront. This story is far from over, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. So stay with me, because in the next part of this video, I'm going to reveal the explosive twists that Sarah uncovered. The truth is coming, and it's going to change everything. But here's the question I want to leave you with. What would you do if you found out that everything you thought you knew about your family, your identity, and your very existence wasn't true? Think about it. And don't go anywhere, because we're just getting started. Stay tuned for the next part of Sarah's unbelievable story. As Sarah began to wrestle with the possibility that her father might not be who she thought he was, she couldn't help but feel like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. For years, she had led a relatively peaceful, happy life in a small town in Ohio, surrounded by people who knew her family well. Her father, Richard, was well known in their community. He was a respected lawyer, a man of integrity and character. Everyone loved Richard. He was the kind of father every daughter would hope for. He was there for her first heartbreak, her high school graduation, and all the milestones in between. And when Sarah went through a tough time in her 20s after a difficult breakup, he was the one who pulled her back up, offering advice and guidance as only a father could. Her mother, Helen, was equally supportive, always gentle and loving, the epitome of a nurturing figure. But despite how close-knit their family appeared, Sarah had always felt there was a part of her parents' past they kept hidden, some unspoken thing that she never dared to question. There was always that feeling in the back of her mind, a kind of unease whenever the subject of her family's history came up. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. It wasn't until that day at the clinic that the unsettling feeling she had buried deep inside her began to surface with a vengeance. Sarah's immediate reaction to the nurse's comment about her blood type not matching her father's was to dismiss it as a simple mistake. After all, there was no logical explanation for it. Richard had been in her life since the day she was born. Helen and Richard had always seemed like the perfect couple, the ideal parents. In fact, when Sarah was younger, her friends would often joke that her family was the definition of family goals. So, why would this detail, something so trivial on the surface, change everything? Yet, as Sarah's mind churned, she couldn't let go of the feeling that something was terribly wrong. That night, she lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the thoughts that swirled in her mind. What if this wasn't a mistake? What if there was a hidden truth, one that no one had ever talked about? The next morning, Sarah did what any person would do when faced with a situation like this. She went straight to her mother. She asked Helen if she knew anything about this discrepancy with blood types. Helen looked at her with confusion, then shrugged it off as a simple error at the clinic, saying it was nothing to worry about. But Sarah wasn't convinced. There was something in her mother's eyes, a flash of hesitation that made Sarah's stomach churn. Her mother was never like this. Helen was always open and upfront. So why the sudden defensiveness? Sarah tried to push for more details, but Helen quickly changed the subject, dismissing her concerns with an almost forced laugh. Maybe it's just a mix-up, sweetheart. Don't stress about it, she said, but the reassurance felt hollow. It didn't sit right with Sarah. If it was such a small mistake, why couldn't Helen just explain it calmly, like she always had in the past? Why the sudden tension in her voice? Sarah knew deep down that something wasn't adding up. But what could she do? She wasn't about to just go around accusing her parents of keeping something from her without having proof. So, she turned to another person who might have more insight, her best friend, Emily. Emily had been Sarah's confidant for years, and if there was anyone who could offer perspective, it was her. Over coffee one afternoon, Sarah brought up the blood donor incident, explaining everything from the clinic visit to her awkward conversation with her mother. Emily listened intently, but then, when Sarah finished, Emily's expression shifted in a way Sarah didn't expect. "Sarah," Emily said, lowering her voice, "I think I know what might be going on." She paused, glancing around the coffee shop as if checking for eavesdroppers, though it was just the two of them. "Your mom's never told you about the family, right?" Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, your mom's side of the family," Emily continued. "She never talks about them, right? It's always been your dad's family she's focused on. She's kept them at arm's length. You've never met anyone from her side." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Of course, Emily was right. Her mother had always been somewhat distant from her own relatives. When Sarah was little, she could remember how the holidays would come and go, and her mom would make vague excuses about why they couldn't visit her relatives. There was always a reason: work, travel, or simply not enough time. But as she got older, those excuses started to feel more like walls. She had never met her mother's siblings, and beyond a few mentions of her mother's parents, Sarah knew little about her maternal grandparents. It was as though Helen's family didn't even exist. "I never thought about it like that," Sarah said, her voice trailing off as she processed what Emily had just shared. "But I still don't understand how this could be related. What does this have to do with my blood type?" "That's the thing," Emily said, her eyes narrowing. "Your mom has always been secretive about her past. Who knows what she might have been hiding? Maybe the family isn't as perfect as you thought. Maybe there's a reason she's kept certain things from you." Sarah sat back in her chair, her mind racing. Emily's words were like a seed planted in her mind, slowly sprouting into something much bigger. Could it be true? Was there something about her mother's past that could explain everything? Could her mother have had an affair, or was there some other family secret that had been hidden for decades? But even as these thoughts began to take shape, Sarah couldn't help but feel another, darker possibility creeping in. What if Richard wasn't the only person with a secret to hide? The deeper Sarah dug, the more suspicious she became of everyone around her. Her father had always been a figure of integrity, but what if that was just a facade? Was he hiding something from her, too? After all, he was a successful lawyer, someone who dealt with sensitive information daily. It wasn't beyond reason that he could have concealed something about his past. As Sarah tried to piece together the puzzle, she found herself entangled in a web of questions, each one leading to more uncertainty. Her mind couldn't stop racing. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that every answer only led to more questions. She was beginning to feel like she was trapped in a maze, and the walls were closing in. What if the truth was something she wasn't prepared to face? What if the revelation of her real parentage, if that was even the case, would shatter her entire sense of who she was? But one thing was clear: Sarah was not going to stop until she had the truth. She couldn't. The answers were out there, and no matter how difficult, she would uncover them. But the question remained: who was really behind the lies? Was it her mother, her father, or someone else entirely? As Sarah's investigation began to reach new heights, the mystery only deepened, and the answers she sought seemed further and further out of reach. The only thing she knew for sure was that the truth was waiting for her. And when she finally found it, everything would change, forever. And so, as Sarah prepared to confront her parents once more, she had to ask herself, was she ready to face the truth, no matter what it was? The storm was coming, and she could feel it brewing. But would she be able to weather it, or would the truth be more than she could handle? As Sarah's search for answers intensified, the weight of the mystery she was unraveling began to feel overwhelming. Every day, she found herself getting deeper into a labyrinth of questions, each one leading to another, with no clear exit. She had thought that once she started digging, the truth would reveal itself, but what she found instead were dead ends and evasions. The more she searched, the more resistance she encountered, and it became increasingly clear that someone or something was working hard to keep her from uncovering the truth. It started innocently enough. Sarah had managed to track down a distant cousin on her mother's side, someone who might have known more about Helen's past. The questions multiplied faster than Sarah could keep track of, and she realized she was no closer to finding answers than she had been days ago. But one thing was clear: there was more to her father's past than she had ever imagined, and someone was willing to do whatever it took to keep the truth buried. The game had changed. Someone was now playing in the shadows, and Sarah was no longer sure who she could trust. As she stood there, holding the photo, her mind raced with questions and suspicions. Who was this woman, and why was her father keeping this secret? The twists were only getting deeper, and the answers were slipping further from her grasp. But Sarah knew one thing for sure: she couldn't stop now. The truth was out there, and she was determined to find it, even if it meant going up against the very people she thought she could trust the most. As Sarah stood there, still holding the mysterious photograph of her father with the unknown woman, she felt a deep sense of unease. She didn't know what this new piece of evidence meant, but it clearly indicated that there was more to her father's past than she had ever imagined. The air around her felt thick, charged with an energy that made it hard to think clearly. Every part of her wanted to know the truth, but the more she uncovered, the more her world seemed to fracture into a million pieces. What was the real story? Was her father hiding something much darker than she could have ever anticipated? The unanswered questions gnawed at her, but just as she was about to gather her thoughts, her phone buzzed on the counter. The message that popped up on the screen made her heart skip a beat. It was from Emily, her best friend, the one person Sarah had trusted with every detail of her investigation. But this message was unlike anything Sarah had received before. Emily's words were brief, unsettling, and cryptic. "I know what you're looking for. Stop before it's too late. I'm warning you, Sarah. Things are more dangerous than you think." Sarah stared at the text, trying to make sense of it. Emily had always been a rock for her, someone who had supported her no matter what. But now, something felt off. Why would Emily, who had always been so open with her, suddenly warn her to stop digging into her family's past? It didn't make sense. Was this just another attempt to throw her off course, another layer of deception she hadn't seen before? Sarah's hands shook as she considered the possibility that Emily might be involved in this in some way, perhaps in a way that Sarah couldn't yet comprehend. The more she thought about it, the more she realized just how little she actually knew about Emily. They had been best friends for years, but there were aspects of Emily's life that had always remained a mystery. Emily had never spoken much about her own family or her past. Sarah had always assumed it was just a matter of her being a private person, but now, in the wake of everything she was learning about her own family, Sarah couldn't help but wonder if Emily was hiding something too. Was there a connection between Emily's past and the mysteries surrounding Sarah's family? Was it possible that Emily knew more than she was letting on? Could she have been involved in helping keep secrets hidden? The thought was a jarring one, but it gnawed at her. To make matters even worse, as if the stakes weren't already high enough, Sarah received an unexpected phone call the next morning. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, but it carried an unmistakable weight, someone who clearly knew more than they should. "Sarah, I know what you're looking for," the voice said in a low, almost hushed tone. "You need to stop before it goes too far. Trust me, it's not just your family that's at risk. You're playing with fire, and if you don't back off, there's no telling who else will get hurt." The line went dead before Sarah could ask any questions. Her heart was pounding in her chest. Who was that? And what did they know? The cryptic warning felt like a threat, but it was also a puzzle. The connection between her search for the truth and the warning she had just received was impossible to ignore. There was clearly someone or something desperate to keep Sarah from uncovering the answers she had been chasing for so long. As if that weren't enough, the next piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. Later that day, Sarah was going through her father's old office, looking for anything that might lead her closer to the truth. She had grown accustomed to this feeling of trespassing into areas of her life that once seemed so safe and familiar. But now, every drawer she opened, every piece of paper she examined, felt like a landmine waiting to explode. She opened a drawer she hadn't checked before and found an envelope, its contents carefully sealed. It looked old, much older than anything else in the office, and the paper inside was yellowed with age. Sarah carefully unfolded the letter, her breath catching in her throat as she read the first few words. It was addressed to Richard, her father, and written in a hand she didn't recognize. The letter was dated years before Sarah was even born, and the words contained inside were shocking. I know what you did. You can't hide it forever. The truth will come out, and when it does, you'll regret everything. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. What was this letter about? And why had her father kept it hidden all these years? Was this evidence of something even darker in her family's past, something that Richard had been trying to bury? She read the letter over and over, but the cryptic nature of the message left her with more questions than answers. Who had written it, and what was it referring to? Could this letter be connected to the mysterious woman in the photograph? Was there a deeper betrayal at play here, one that involved more than just her father's hidden past? As Sarah tried to piece together what this letter meant, her mind was flooded with possibilities. Maybe the betrayal went even deeper than she had thought. Maybe Richard wasn't the only one keeping secrets. Was her mother aware of this? And if so, why hadn't she told Sarah anything? If Richard had been hiding something as huge as this letter suggested, could it be the key to understanding everything: her blood type discrepancy, the mysterious woman in the photo, the strange threats she was receiving? The deeper Sarah dug, the more things didn't add up. The sense of unease that had followed her since the beginning of her investigation now felt like an overwhelming tide, threatening to drown her. She wasn't just uncovering secrets, she was uncovering a tangled web of lies, betrayal, and deception that went far beyond anything she had imagined. But with every step she took, it felt like the walls were closing in on her. She had no way of knowing who she could trust or who was behind the messages, threats, and mysteries that kept piling up. The more she learned, the more dangerous this journey seemed. It became clear to Sarah that she couldn't stop now. The truth, whatever it was too important to ignore. But as she stared at the letter in her hand, she realized that finding the truth might cost her more than she was willing to pay. People were watching her, and there were powerful forces at play that wanted to keep the past buried. But who were they? And what were they willing to do to stop her from uncovering the truth? As Sarah tried to make sense of everything, one question echoed in her mind: what was the real cost of uncovering the truth, and was she ready to face the consequences? The closer she got, the more the danger seemed to escalate, and the more she realized that she was in far deeper than she had ever anticipated. The stakes had never been higher, and she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was willing to go to any lengths to make sure she never found the answers she was searching for. The tension Sarah had been feeling for days, even weeks, reached a breaking point one late evening. It started innocently enough. She had gone for a walk, something she often did to clear her mind after hours of combing through her father's office, speaking to anyone she could find who might help her uncover the truth. The cool evening air was a small comfort, but her thoughts were elsewhere, consumed by the growing weight of everything she had uncovered. Her phone buzzed again with another cryptic message, this time from Emily. It read, "It's too late now. There's no turning back. I warned you, Sarah. You're on your own." The message made her heart drop, and as she walked through the quiet streets of her neighborhood, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. The streetlights flickered in the distance, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch just a little too far. She quickened her pace, but the sense of being followed grew stronger, more insistent, as though someone, perhaps more than one person, was just out of sight, trailing her every move. Sarah's breath became shallow, her chest tightening with an anxiety she hadn't felt before. She tried to rationalize it at first, telling herself that it was just the stress of everything catching up with her, that the weight of the investigation was finally getting to her. But something deep in her gut told her that this wasn't just paranoia. There was something wrong, something much bigger than her, and it was closing in. As she turned a corner, she caught a glimpse of a figure moving quickly across the street, just a few yards behind her. She froze for a moment, trying to make out any details, but the figure melted into the shadows as quickly as it had appeared. Her heart was racing, and the icy grip of fear had settled in her stomach. She broke into a sprint, weaving through the quiet, darkened streets, not daring to look back. Every instinct told her to get home, lock the doors, and hide, but she couldn't shake the sense that whatever was chasing her, whatever was lurking in the dark, wasn't going to let her go that easily. Her thoughts raced. Who could it be? Was it someone connected to her father's past? Had Emily been involved in something deeper than she had admitted? Or was this some faceless force that had been pulling the strings all along? Sarah had no answers, only the gnawing feeling that time was running out. When she finally reached her front door, she slammed it shut behind her, locking it as quickly as she could. Her pulse hammered in her ears, and she felt dizzy, almost disoriented, from the panic. She stood in the entryway for a few moments, her back pressed against the door, trying to steady her breath. But the unease didn't fade. She had barely managed to collect herself when the phone rang again, the harsh, sudden noise making her jump. She grabbed it, hoping for some form of comfort, but what she heard on the other end sent a chill through her spine. "Sarah," a low voice whispered, almost too quietly to hear. "We warned you. You should have stopped digging. Now, you'll see what happens when you don't listen." The line went dead before Sarah could respond. Her hands were shaking so badly that she had to sit down, trying to comprehend what had just happened. She didn't recognize the voice, but it was unmistakably a threat. The finality in the tone sent a deep sense of dread through her. They were watching her, and they were no longer just trying to scare her, they were getting closer, making it clear they had control. She wasn't safe anymore. The reality of the situation hit Sarah with full force. All the cryptic warnings, the missing letters, the strange phone calls, and the ominous figures in the shadows, it was all leading to this moment. The world she thought she knew had crumbled away, and the truth she had been chasing was now something far more dangerous than she could have ever anticipated. But even worse than the danger that was closing in was the realization that she didn't know who to trust anymore. Her father, who had always been her anchor, was now a figure of suspicion. Her best friend Emily had warned her to stop digging and then sent a message that felt like a warning from someone else entirely. Everyone around her seemed to be playing a part in a game whose rules she didn't understand. And the more she uncovered, the more she realized how far this went, how deep the lies ran. That night, as Sarah tried to sleep, her mind raced through 1,000 scenarios. Could Emily have been the one behind the phone call? Had her father been hiding even darker secrets than she thought? Was someone in her own family involved in the web of deception, pulling the strings to keep the truth from coming out? She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, too terrified to close her eyes, knowing that whoever was out there, whoever was behind this, was getting bolder. They had a plan, and she was nothing more than a piece in it. The next morning, Sarah's worst fear was confirmed. When she went to check on her mother, who had been out of town visiting family for a few days, she found that her mother had disappeared without a trace. All her belongings were gone. No note, no call, nothing to explain where she had gone or why. Sarah's stomach churned with dread. This wasn't just a coincidence anymore. Someone, somehow, had been manipulating events, and they were going to extreme lengths to keep her from uncovering the truth. Her mother had vanished, she was gone, and it felt like everything was slipping through Sarah's fingers. Panic surged through her veins as she tried to call her mother, but the line went straight to voicemail. She couldn't breathe. What was happening? Where was her mother? Was she in danger too? And why had she disappeared so suddenly? The message she had received the night before seemed to hold more weight now, the ominous warning clear in her mind. It was too late to stop. She had already gone too far, and whoever was behind all of this was making sure there was no turning back. She searched through the house, frantically checking every room, as if expecting her mother to reappear at any moment, to tell her it was all a mistake. But there was no sign of her anywhere. Sarah felt the walls closing in around her. Her hands trembled as she went through her mother's things, looking for a clue, something to tell her where her mother had gone or what had happened. It was as if the very house was conspiring against her, withholding the answers she needed. The more she searched, the more she realized that she might never get those answers. Every thread of her investigation had led to this moment, and now it felt like she was in over her head. The silence in the house was deafening, and Sarah was left with only the fear that had been steadily creeping into her bones. She had no idea who was behind this or what their endgame was, but she was certain of one thing: they would stop at nothing to keep her from uncovering the truth. The stakes had never been higher. Time was running out. And as Sarah stood there, alone in the empty house, the only thing she knew for sure was that she couldn't trust anyone anymore, not even herself. The danger was real, and she had no idea how far it would go to silence her. As the days passed, Sarah's life felt like it was crumbling around her. The disappearance of her mother, the escalating threats, and the haunting mystery of her father's past consumed every waking moment. She couldn't shake the feeling that everything she had believed about her family, her life, and her identity was a lie. The fear, the tension, it was relentless. She had tried to reach out to Emily again, but her messages went unanswered. The silence was deafening, and each unanswered call only deepened the pit of anxiety in Sarah's stomach. She was alone in this, with no one to trust and no clear path forward. The only thing she could hold on to was the twisted puzzle she was trying to solve, one piece at a time. But then, something happened that completely shattered everything Sarah thought she knew. It came in the form of an unexpected phone call late one night. The voice on the other end was familiar, but it was the last person she ever expected to hear from: her father's old lawyer, Mr. Thompson. He had been a constant figure in the background of her life, someone she barely thought about but trusted implicitly when it came to her father's affairs. She had seen him only a few times over the years, but those meetings were always professional, distant, and businesslike. "Sarah," he said, his voice urgent but calm, "I need to speak with you. It's about your father. And it's about your mother. I don't know how to say this, but everything you've been investigating, everything you've been led to believe, it's all wrong. You need to come to my office tomorrow. I'll explain everything." Her heart raced, a mix of dread and curiosity building inside her. What could this man possibly know? How could he be involved in everything she had uncovered? She had spent so much time trying to make sense of the twisted web of secrets her father had left behind, and now, after all the danger and the threats, here was someone who might hold the key to unlocking it all. The next morning, Sarah barely slept. She kept replaying the conversation in her mind, trying to make sense of the cryptic words. "Everything you've been led to believe is wrong." What did he mean by that? She knew she had to go to his office, but the thought of walking into that place, knowing what might await her, felt suffocating. She had no idea if she was walking into a trap or if Mr. Thompson was truly offering her a lifeline. But she had no choice, this was the only lead she had left. When Sarah arrived at his office, the atmosphere was far more ominous than she had anticipated. The walls were lined with bookshelves, heavy with legal texts and dusty old files. The lights flickered overhead, casting shadows that made the space feel colder than it should have been. Mr. Thompson was sitting behind a large wooden desk, his expression unreadable. The moment he saw Sarah, he motioned for her to sit. "Sarah, I don't have much time, so listen carefully," he began, his voice low and filled with an urgency she hadn't expected. "The investigation you've been conducting, the one into your father's past, it's not what it seems. There's something I should have told you years ago, something I kept from you for your own safety. Your father wasn't just hiding something from you, Sarah. He was protecting you. The truth is far darker than you could ever imagine." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The words felt like a punch to the gut, a revelation she wasn't prepared for. "What do you mean?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "What could be so bad that he had to hide it from me? My whole life, everything I've known, it's all been a lie." Mr. Thompson's eyes darkened, and for a moment, Sarah thought he might not continue. But then he spoke again, each word heavy with the weight of a secret he had clearly carried for far too long. "Your mother, Sarah," he said slowly, "she wasn't the woman you thought she was. And neither was your father. There's a reason he kept his past buried, and a reason your mother disappeared without a trace. It was all part of a much bigger plan. Your investigation wasn't just about uncovering family secrets, it was about preventing something far worse from happening. The truth you're seeking, the truth about your blood type, the photographs, everything you've uncovered, it all leads back to a conspiracy that goes far beyond your family. I can't explain it all now, but you need to trust me when I say that your life is in danger." Sarah's mind spun as his words sank in. She had thought she was uncovering the darkest truth about her family, but now it seemed like the entire foundation of her investigation was based on lies, deception, and something far more sinister. The puzzle she had been trying to solve, her father's secret life, her mother's disappearance, the threats, everything was now tangled in a web that was much larger and more dangerous than she had imagined. Mr. Thompson leaned forward, his eyes locking with hers, a look of genuine fear in them. I know this is hard to hear, Sarah, but you need to stop asking questions. I was told to keep you in the dark for your protection. I made a mistake. I should have told you the truth years ago, but I couldn't. Now it's too late. Before Sarah could respond, the door to the office slammed open, and a figure entered. Her heart stopped as she recognized the person standing in the doorway. It was Emily, her best friend, looking pale, frantic, and holding something in her hand. Sarah, we need to leave. Now, Emily said, her voice urgent. They know you're here. They've been tracking your every move. It's not safe. Sarah stood up, her mind racing. The pieces of the puzzle were slipping out of her grasp, and she couldn't tell who was playing what role anymore. Was Emily trying to protect her, or was she part of the conspiracy? Was Mr. Thompson truly trying to help, or was he manipulating her with lies to cover up something even more dangerous? Emily's face was twisted with fear, and for the first time, Sarah felt a genuine sense of panic rising inside her. She had trusted Emily, had always believed her to be her ally, but now, she wasn't so sure. Could she trust anyone? Was anyone who they claimed to be? Or was the truth even darker than she had ever imagined? The room seemed to close in around Sarah as she realized just how deep this conspiracy went. Sarah felt the walls closing in around her. Her hands trembled as she went through her mother's things, looking for a clue, something to tell her where her mother had gone or what had happened. It was as if the very house was conspiring against her, withholding the answers she needed. The more she searched, the more she realized that she might never get those answers. Every thread of her investigation had led to this moment, and now it felt like she was in over her head. The silence in the house was deafening, and Sarah was left with only the fear that had been steadily creeping into her bones. She had no idea who was behind this or what their endgame was, but she was certain of one thing: they would stop at nothing to keep her from uncovering the truth. The stakes had never been higher. Time was running out. And as Sarah stood there, alone in the empty house, the only thing she knew for sure was that she couldn't trust anyone anymore, not even herself. The danger was real, and she had no idea how far it would go to silence her. As the days passed, Sarah's life felt like it was crumbling around her. The disappearance of her mother, the escalating threats, and the haunting mystery of her father's past consumed every waking moment. She couldn't shake the feeling that everything she had believed about her family, her life, and her identity was a lie. The fear, the tension, it was relentless. She had tried to reach out to Emily again, but her messages went unanswered. The silence was deafening, and each unanswered call only deepened the pit of anxiety in Sarah's stomach. She was alone in this, with no one to trust and no clear path forward. The only thing she could hold on to was the twisted puzzle she was trying to solve, one piece at a time. But then, something happened that completely shattered everything Sarah thought she knew. It came in the form of an unexpected phone call late one night. The voice on the other end was familiar, but it was the last person she ever expected to hear from: her father's old lawyer, Mr. Thompson. He had been a constant figure in the background of her life, someone she barely thought about but trusted implicitly when it came to her father's affairs. She had seen him only a few times over the years, but those meetings were always professional, distant, and businesslike. "Sarah," he said, his voice urgent but calm, "I need to speak with you. It's about your father. And it's about your mother. I don't know how to say this, but everything you've been investigating, everything you've been led to believe, it's all wrong. You need to come to my office tomorrow. I'll explain everything." Her heart raced, a mix of dread and curiosity building inside her. What could this man possibly know? How could he be involved in everything she had uncovered? She had spent so much time trying to make sense of the twisted web of secrets her father had left behind, and now, after all the danger and the threats, here was someone who might hold the key to unlocking it all. The next morning, Sarah barely slept. She kept replaying the conversation in her mind, trying to make sense of the cryptic words. "Everything you've been led to believe is wrong." What did he mean by that? She knew she had to go to his office, but the thought of walking into that place, knowing what might await her, felt suffocating. She had no idea if she was walking into a trap or if Mr. Thompson was truly offering her a lifeline. But she had no choice, this was the only lead she had left. When Sarah arrived at his office, the atmosphere was far more ominous than she had anticipated. The walls were lined with bookshelves, heavy with legal texts and dusty old files. The lights flickered overhead, casting shadows that made the space feel colder than it should have been. Mr. Thompson was sitting behind a large wooden desk, his expression unreadable. The moment he saw Sarah, he motioned for her to sit. "Sarah, I don't have much time, so listen carefully," he began, his voice low and filled with an urgency she hadn't expected. "The investigation you've been conducting, the one into your father's past, it's not what it seems. There's something I should have told you years ago, something I kept from you for your own safety. Your father wasn't just hiding something from you, Sarah. He was protecting you. The truth is far darker than you could ever imagine." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The words felt like a punch to the gut, a revelation she wasn't prepared for. "What do you mean?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "What could be so bad that he had to hide it from me? My whole life, everything I've known, it's all been a lie." Mr. Thompson's eyes darkened, and for a moment, Sarah thought he might not continue. But then he spoke again, each word heavy with the weight of a secret he had clearly carried for far too long. "Your mother, Sarah," he said slowly, "she wasn't the woman you thought she was. And neither was your father. There's a reason he kept his past buried, and a reason your mother disappeared without a trace. It was all part of a much bigger plan. Your investigation wasn't just about uncovering family secrets, it was about preventing something far worse from happening. The truth you're seeking, the truth about your blood type, the photographs, everything you've uncovered, it all leads back to a conspiracy that goes far beyond your family. I can't explain it all now, but you need to trust me when I say that your life is in danger." Sarah's mind spun as his words sank in. She had thought she was uncovering the darkest truth about her family, but now it seemed like the entire foundation of her investigation was based on lies, deception, and something far more sinister. The puzzle she had been trying to solve, her father's secret life, her mother's disappearance, the threats, everything was now tangled in a web that was much larger and more dangerous than she had imagined. Mr. Thompson leaned forward, his eyes locking with hers, a look of genuine fear in them. "I know this is hard to hear, Sarah, but you need to stop asking questions. I was told to keep you in the dark for your protection. I made a mistake. I should have told you the truth years ago, but I couldn't. Now it's too late." Before Sarah could respond, the door to the office slammed open, and a figure entered. Her heart stopped as she recognized the person standing in the doorway. It was Emily, her best friend, looking pale, frantic, and holding something in her hand. "Sarah, we need to leave now," Emily said, her voice urgent. "They know you're here. They've been tracking your every move. It's not safe." Sarah stood up, her mind racing. The pieces of the puzzle were slipping out of her grasp, and she couldn't tell who was playing what role anymore. Was Emily trying to protect her, or was she part of the conspiracy? Was Mr. Thompson truly trying to help, or was he manipulating her with lies to cover up something even more dangerous? Emily's face was twisted with fear, and for the first time, Sarah felt a genuine sense of panic rising inside her. She had trusted Emily, had always believed her to be her ally, but now, she wasn't so sure. Could she trust anyone? Was anyone who they claimed to be? Or was the truth even darker than she had ever imagined? The room seemed to close in around Sarah as she realized just how deep this conspiracy went. The investigation she had started with such conviction was no longer just a search for answers, it was a fight for survival. And as Emily tugged at her arm, urging her to leave, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the true story, everything she thought she knew, was only just beginning to unfold. But now, the stakes were far higher, and the mystery was no longer just about her family. It was about something much bigger, something that could destroy everything she thought was real. As Sarah and Emily rushed through the darkened streets, her mind was in overdrive, unable to process the whirlwind of revelations and fear that had been spiraling out of control for weeks. The weight of Mr. Thompson's words, the promise of a truth too dangerous to uncover, seemed to follow them like a shadow. But even as she tried to make sense of it all, another, deeper question gnawed at her. What if Emily, her closest friend, was in on it? What if the person she trusted most had been playing her all along? "Emily," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper as they turned a corner, "what's really going on? What's happening? Who are they?" She could feel the tremor in her words, the uncertainty creeping into her chest. Emily had been her anchor, the one constant in a life turned upside down, but now, as they ran from the unknown, Sarah couldn't ignore the nagging suspicion that perhaps Emily was just another part of the puzzle, a piece that didn't fit the way she thought it should. Emily's grip tightened on her arm, her eyes darting nervously as they moved faster. "You don't understand, Sarah," she said urgently, her voice shaking. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. I can't tell you everything right now, but if you don't trust me, you're not going to make it out of this alive. Do you understand?" The desperation in her tone was palpable, but Sarah felt a cold knot in her stomach. Her best friend's eyes were full of fear, but there was something else, something almost like guilt. Something she had never seen before. They reached Emily's car, parked in a secluded area behind an old building, the kind of place that felt too quiet, too isolated for comfort. As Emily opened the door and urged Sarah inside, a cold breeze washed over Sarah, sending a shiver down her spine. She had been so focused on the danger from the shadows, the people lurking out there, that she hadn't stopped to consider the possibility that someone close to her was playing both sides. But now, as the car door slammed shut behind them, and the engine roared to life, the realization hit her harder than anything before. "Why did you send me that warning, Emily?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with the weight of everything that had happened. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? I've been chasing this mystery, risking everything, and now it feels like I've been set up to fail." She looked at Emily, her heart pounding in her chest. "Tell me the truth, Emily. I need to know. You've been involved from the start, haven't you? You knew something I didn't. And now I'm stuck in the middle of a game I don't even understand." Emily's face twisted in a mixture of pain and frustration, her fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles were white. The silence between them felt suffocating, thick with unspoken truths. For a long moment, it seemed like Emily wouldn't answer. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I never wanted it to be like this, Sarah. I never wanted you to get caught up in this. But I couldn't stop it. I tried to protect you, but it's too late now. I should have told you sooner, but I couldn't. They wouldn't let me." She exhaled sharply, her eyes flickering to the rearview mirror, as if checking to make sure no one was following them. "I thought you were safe, but I've made things worse. I don't know what to do anymore." Sarah's heart raced as her mind spun with the implications of Emily's words. She had no idea what was happening, what Emily was involved in, or how deep this ran. The world that Sarah thought she understood had fractured, and now everything, every relationship, every piece of evidence, was just a blur of confusion and fear. The person she trusted most, the one person who had been by her side through all of this, was suddenly the one she feared most. "Emily," Sarah said, her voice low but steady, "I need to know what's going on. I need to know everything. You've been in this for longer than I've realized, haven't you? You've known things about my family, about my father, things that I don't understand. And I need answers, because if I don't get them, I'm not sure who to trust anymore." The words tasted bitter in her mouth, the betrayal slicing through her thoughts. Emily's face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes as she turned down a narrow street, away from the city lights. "I didn't have a choice," she whispered. "I was trying to protect you from the truth. But now, it's too late. They've already found us. They know what we're doing. And they're not going to stop until they get what they want." A sense of dread flooded Sarah's veins as she tried to process Emily's words. Who were they? Who had been pulling the strings all along? And why had Emily gotten so involved in this, especially if it meant putting Sarah's life in danger? The car screeched to a halt in front of a small, run-down building, a place that Sarah had never seen before. Emily quickly cut the engine and turned to her, her face pale. "Listen, Sarah. I can't keep running from this. I'm in too deep, and so are you. But there's something you need to know. Something I didn't tell you, something that could change everything. Your father wasn't just hiding from the past, he was running from it. And now, it's all coming back." Sarah's pulse quickened as she looked at Emily, who was now staring ahead, avoiding her gaze. "What do you mean?" Sarah demanded. "What are you talking about? What did my father do?" Emily looked at her, her eyes full of regret. "Your father didn't just have enemies. He was one. He was involved in something so dangerous, so secretive, that it could destroy everything. And you, Sarah, are a part of it. You've been part of it all along. The weight of Emily's words crushed Sarah's chest. She could feel the world spinning around her, every piece of the puzzle falling into place and yet nothing making sense. She had been trying to piece together her family's history, only to find out that her own existence was tangled up in something far more sinister than she could have ever imagined. Just as Sarah was about to ask more, her phone rang, an unknown number flashing on the screen. Emily's eyes widened as she grabbed the phone and quickly pressed it to her ear. "It's them," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We need to make a decision right now, Sarah. They're giving us an ultimatum." The line crackled, and a voice came through, cold and authoritative. "Sarah, Emily. You've been asking too many questions. You have two choices. Stop digging, forget everything you've learned, and walk away from this, or we'll make sure no one is left standing. The truth will remain buried, and you'll be a part of the lie, just like everyone else. Choose wisely." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah's heart pounded as she tried to process what was happening. Sarah's breath caught in her throat, her pulse racing as she followed her, heart pounding with the knowledge that everything had changed. What she had once believed was a family secret, a mystery that she could solve, was now a deadly game. And in that game, there were no winners, only survivors. The stakes had never been higher. And as Sarah stepped into the cold, unforgiving night, she understood one thing for certain: she was no longer running to find answers. She was running for her life. The night air was thick with tension as Sarah and Emily hurried through the dimly lit alley, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the walls like a ticking clock counting down to something they both feared. They had been running for what felt like forever, but now, with every corner they turned, every shadow that loomed too close, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being herded into a trap. It was as if someone was always one step ahead, pulling the strings of this twisted game they'd found themselves in. The deeper they went, the more tangled everything became. There was no going back. No safe place left. Emily stopped suddenly, turning to face Sarah with a look of absolute resolve. Her face, usually full of warmth and comfort, now seemed distant and cold. It was as though the person Sarah had trusted her entire life was gone, replaced by someone Sarah didn't recognize. Emily's voice was low, but it held a sharpness that cut through the silence between them. "We're running out of time," Emily said, her voice cracking with the weight of what was happening. "You have to understand, Sarah. We're not just fighting for our lives anymore. This goes beyond us. This is about everything. Your father's murder wasn't an accident. It wasn't just some random hit. He was killed because he knew too much. And they've been watching you, waiting for the moment to take you out, too." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. She had heard rumors. She had followed the clues. But the enormity of what Emily was saying, the full weight of it, felt like a rock crashing into her chest. They had been chasing shadows, uncovering secrets that led them to the brink of something far more dangerous than a simple family mystery. They were standing on the edge of a conspiracy so deep, so well orchestrated, that it could destroy everything. "Emily, who are they?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper, filled with fear and disbelief. "Who has been behind all of this?" Emily hesitated, her eyes darting nervously to the darkened streets. "It's not just about one person. It's about a network, a powerful organization that's been in control of everything for decades. And your father, he was their biggest threat. He tried to expose them, tried to warn people, and they silenced him. They knew what he was capable of, and when they realized you were connected to him, they knew you were a threat too. But Sarah, I didn't know who I was dealing with. I didn't know how deep this went. And now they're coming for you." Sarah's pulse quickened, her heart racing as she processed the gravity of Emily's words. Her father's death had never made sense, not fully, but now it was all starting to piece together. But there was one thing she couldn't understand, the one thing that had always gnawed at her. "If they wanted to kill me, why haven't they done it already?" she demanded. "Why am I still alive?" Emily's face softened, but there was a look in her eyes that Sarah hadn't seen before, something darker. Something regretful. "Because they need you," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "They've been watching you for years, waiting for you to make the right move. Your father's blood runs through your veins. You're the key to everything they've been hiding. Before Sarah could process what that meant, the sound of a car engine roared in the distance, its headlights slicing through the darkness. Panic surged in her chest, and she instinctively grabbed Emily's arm, pulling her toward an old, crumbling building nearby. They didn't have much time. The walls were closing in faster than they could run. We need to confront them, now. I need answers, Sarah said, her voice filled with a new determination, a fire she hadn't felt until this moment. She had spent too long running from the truth, too long buried in uncertainty. It was time to end this, to find out who was behind the curtain pulling the strings, and finally learn what they wanted from her. Emily hesitated. Sarah, you don't understand. If we go to them now, if we try to fight back, there's no turning back. They'll destroy everything, and everyone. We're not equipped for this. I'm not equipped for this. Her voice cracked, as though the weight of her own guilt was finally coming to a head. I didn't want you involved, but now, it's too late. Sarah's gaze was steely as she looked at Emily, her decision final. I'm done running. We go in, we confront them, and we end this. I'm not scared anymore, Emily. I've come too far to back down now. With no more words, they hurried inside the building, the air thick with dust and the remnants of something long forgotten. The eerie quiet of the place only heightened the sense of dread that lingered in the pit of Sarah's stomach. But she knew they had no choice. They were walking into the heart of the storm. As they ascended the staircase, the sound of footsteps echoed from above. Someone was waiting for them. The final confrontation was at hand. Sarah's heart raced as they reached the top floor, the door creaking open to reveal a dimly lit room filled with figures she hadn't expected. It was a meeting room of sorts, large, sterile, and cold, with a single, long table in the center. But what took her breath away was who sat at that table. There, in the dim light, was a familiar face. Someone she had never suspected, someone who had been there every step of the way, who had comforted her, guided her through the chaos. Her mother's former partner, Detective Kane. His cold, calculating gaze locked onto hers, and for a split second, Sarah's world tilted on its axis. This was the man who had helped her investigate her father's death, the one person who had always been there, who had always been her ally. And now, here he was, part of the very conspiracy she had been chasing. You shouldn't have come here, Sarah, Kane said, his voice low, filled with a quiet menace that made Sarah's blood run cold. You should have listened. You could have walked away, but now you're in this too deep. There's no going back. The betrayal crashed over Sarah like a wave. The pieces fell into place in her mind. Kane had been one of them all along. He had known what was happening, and he had been feeding her information to lead her straight into the trap. She had trusted him, and now, everything she had believed was shattered. Why? Sarah choked out, her voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and fury. Why did you do this? Why drag me into this lie? Kane stood, his expression unreadable. You don't understand, Sarah. This wasn't about you. It was never about you. It was about control. Your father tried to expose us, tried to ruin everything we've worked for. He knew too much, and he was too dangerous. And you, your father's daughter, you're the final piece of the puzzle. You're the only one who could bring everything down. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air as Sarah realized just how much was at stake, how much had been at stake from the beginning. The truth was too dangerous to be uncovered. And she was the key to unraveling it all. The clock was ticking, and she was standing at the precipice of something much larger than herself. Kane stepped closer, his voice soft, almost pleading. You can still walk away, Sarah. You don't have to be part of this. You don't have to destroy everything. But there was no walking away. Not anymore. She had come too far. The truth had to be exposed, no matter the cost. In that moment, Sarah made a choice. One final decision that would change everything. She wasn't just going to uncover the truth. She was going to burn it all down. And when the dust settled, there would be no going back for any of them. The game had just changed, the room was still. The silence pressed against Sarah like a weight she couldn't shake off. The aftermath of the confrontation was overwhelming. Kane, the man she had trusted, the one person she had believed in more than anyone else, was now just another player in a much larger game, and she had unwittingly walked right into it. The reality of it all began to settle in, and Sarah felt the burden of everything she had learned, the conspiracy that stretched beyond anything she could have imagined, the betrayal from every direction, and the shocking truth about her father's death. It was all out in the open now, the pieces that had haunted her for so long finally falling into place. But even as the truth stood stark and undeniable, there was no sense of victory in it. No satisfaction in uncovering the ugly secrets that had twisted her life into something she never thought possible. She stared at Kane, his once familiar face now a mask of regret and cold resolve. He hadn't wanted to tell her, hadn't wanted to drag her further into the darkness. But it was too late for any of that. They had crossed the line long ago, and Sarah had made her choice. She could see it in his eyes, the same regret she had felt when she first realized just how far she had gone down this rabbit hole. But there was no going back now, no undoing what had already been done. Sarah took a step forward, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "I can't walk away from this, Kane. Not anymore. I need to know what you've been hiding. Why my father had to die. Why all of this matters." For the first time, Kane seemed to falter. His eyes darted away, the weight of his own secrets crashing down on him. "Your father was never meant to be part of this. He was a good man, Sarah. A smart man. But he got too close. And you were never supposed to be involved. But you're not just his daughter. You're the key. The final piece of the puzzle. Without you, everything would have collapsed." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. The answers were there, but they still felt incomplete, fragmented like the shattered pieces of her own life. She had uncovered the truth about her father's murder, about the conspiracy that had been orchestrating everything from behind the scenes, but it wasn't enough. It couldn't be. Nothing would ever bring her father back, and the people who had been involved in his death, those who had manipulated everything, were still out there, still dangerous. "You've given me all the pieces," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "But it's not enough. I still don't understand why this had to happen. Why me? Why him?" Kane took a deep breath, his expression hardening. "Because some truths are too dangerous to expose. Some people are too powerful. The system we're talking about, Sarah, it's not something that can be taken down easily. It's embedded in every part of society, every level of government, law enforcement, even business. Your father tried to bring it all to light, and they couldn't let him. They couldn't let you do the same." Sarah's stomach churned with the weight of his words. Everything had been more carefully constructed than she could have ever imagined. This wasn't just a family secret. This wasn't a simple conspiracy. This was a force that spanned decades, a hidden network that operated in the shadows, manipulating everything in its path. But even as the truth came pouring out, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she had been caught in the middle of something bigger than herself. Her entire life had been built on lies, and now, even with everything laid bare, she was no closer to understanding what her true role in all of this was. Her father's death had been a message. But what was the message for her? She glanced at Emily, who stood silently beside her, her face pale but resolute. There was no turning back for either of them. The world they had known was gone. And as the minutes ticked by, the urgency of what was to come grew louder in Sarah's mind. The conspiracy wasn't over. It was only just beginning. With a heavy sigh, Kane turned toward the door, his face grim. "I can't help you anymore, Sarah. But you have to understand, the truth comes at a price. Some people will stop at nothing to keep their secrets. They won't let you take them down." Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "We'll find a way to expose them. Together. It's not over. It can't be." But as Sarah and Emily stood in the ruins of everything they had fought for, there was a deep, unshakable feeling that this was only the beginning. The conspiracy that had consumed her father's life and now, her own, was far from finished. In fact, it might just be getting started. They had survived the first wave, but the true battle lay ahead. As Sarah walked out into the cold night, the weight of her decision settled heavily on her shoulders. She was no longer the daughter of a man who had been murdered in a senseless tragedy. She was no longer just a victim of circumstance. No, she was something more now. She was a threat. A force that would stop at nothing to bring the truth to light. And as she looked at Emily, the only person left who truly understood, she realized one undeniable truth: the fight had only just begun. The city stretched out before them, dark and quiet, but Sarah knew the storm was far from over. It was only a matter of time before the truth would break free, and when it did, it would change everything. But just as she began to breathe in the reality of their new war, something shifted in the shadows. A figure stood across the street, watching them. Not moving, just watching. Sarah froze, the hairs on the back of her neck standing up. Was it one of them? Was it someone who knew the secrets they were trying to expose? The figure stepped back into the darkness before Sarah could even blink, disappearing without a trace. Her heart skipped a beat. The conspiracy wasn't finished with them yet.